Lyra Blackwood pressed her forehead against the crystal glass wall of her cell, watching frost patterns dance across its surface. Her shadow wings, now mere whispers of their former glory, twitched uselessly against the suppression field that had contained her for the past 3 years in Frost Gate Prison. The guard outside her cell sneered as he passed, his magnetic boots crunching against the metallic floor. "Still trying to melt the walls with your mind, Shadow Witch?" She didn't bother responding. The guards of Frost Gate enjoyed taunting their special prisoner far too much. Instead, she focused on the stars visible through the transparent ceiling far above. Somewhere out there, beyond the crystalline spires of this frozen fortress, freedom beckoned. A distant explosion rocked the facility. Alarms blared as red emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson. Guards rushed past her cell, their boots thundering against metal gratings. Something was wrong, very wrong, and for the first time in years, Lyra felt hope flutter in her chest. The power flickered, and for a split second, the suppression field wavered. Her shadow wings stirred, stretching outward like ink in water before the field snapped back into place. But that moment was enough. She had felt her power, raw and hungry, waiting to be unleashed. More explosions followed, closer now. The sound of plasma fire echoed through the corridors, along with screams and the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, trying to see what was happening. A figure appeared at the end of the corridor, moving with fluid grace through the chaos. He wasn't wearing a guard's uniform or prisoner's jumpsuit. Instead, he wore a fitted black flight suit with silver piping, marking him as a starship pilot. His dark hair was swept back from sharp features, and his eyes, when they met hers, were the color of stern winter skies. He paused at her cell, head tilted. "Well, you're definitely not the quantum core I came to steal." His voice was rich with amusement and something else, curiosity, perhaps. "Let me out," Lyra said, her voice rough from disuse. "I can help you escape." He studied her for a moment, taking in her shadow wings, barely visible through the suppression field, and the intricate markings that spiraled down her arms. "I'm Cashin Vale." "And you are?" "Lyra Blackwood. Last of the Wing Weavers. And if you free me, I promise you'll have the best pilot in 3 systems on your side." Cashin's eyes narrowed. "Wingweaver? Thought your kind were extinct." "Almost. The hegemony made sure of that." She met his gaze steadily. "They'll be here soon with heavy weapons. Make your choice." He pulled out a scanner, running it over her cell's locking mechanism. "If I do this, you follow my lead. No revenge detours. No heroics. We get what I came for and we leave. Deal?" "Deal." The lock clicked, and the suppression field dissolved. Lyra's shadow wings unfurled in a rush of darkness and starlight, filling the corridor with dancing shadows. She stepped out, flexing power she hadn't felt in years. Cashin whistled softly. "Impressive. But we need to move. The quantum core is in the lower vaults," Lyra finished. "I've heard the guards talk about it. I can get you there." She paused, then added, "Why do you want it?" "Let's just say some very dangerous people want it more." He checked his weapon. "And I'd rather not let them have it." More alarms blared. Through the crystalline walls, they could see ships approaching, hegemony cruisers, their weapons already charging. "Time to run," Cashin said, breaking into a sprint. Lyra followed, her shadow wings streaming behind her like liquid night. They raced through corridors where emergency lighting painted everything in shades of blood and darkness. Guards lay unconscious, or worse, evidence of Cashin's initial assault. They reached a security checkpoint where 3 guards were regaining consciousness. Before Cashin could raise his weapon, Lyra's wings expanded, wrapping the guards in darkness. When the shadows receded, the guards lay sleeping, lost in dreams they wouldn't remember. Cashin raised an eyebrow. "Handy trick." "You haven't seen anything yet," Lyra replied, a fierce grin spreading across her face. After 3 years of imprisonment, her power sang through her veins like wildfire. They descended to the lower levels where the air grew colder, their breath forming crystals in the air. The quantum core's vault lay ahead, its doors sealed with enough security to protect a small planet. "This will take time to crack," Cassian said, pulling out his tools. Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "Stand back." She closed her eyes, drawing on powers she'd kept hidden even from her captors. Her shadow wings expanded, becoming vast and terrible, filling the chamber with living darkness. When she opened her eyes again, they blazed with starlight. The vault doors shuddered, then crumpled inward as if crushed by an invisible giant's hand. Cassian stared at her. "You could have escaped any time, couldn't you?" "No." Lyra stepped into the vault. "Some cages are made of more than bars and fields. Sometimes we build them ourselves." She lifted the quantum core, a sphere of swirling energy no larger than her palm, from its pedestal. "But I'm done being afraid of what I am." The fortress shook as the first hegemony ships opened fire. Through the crystal walls, they could see more ships arriving, weapons bristling. Cassian checked his computer. "My ship's in Landing Bay 3. We'll never make it through all those guards." Lyra's wings spread wider, darkness flowing around them both like a protective cocoon. "Who said anything about going through them?" She smiled, and this time there was nothing fierce about it, only freedom. "Hold on tight, Cassian Vale. You're about to find out why they feared us so much." And with that, she wrapped her wings around them both and stepped into shadow, leaving only starlight in their wake. The stellar wraith burst from Frostgate's shadow docks like a bullet from an ancient gun, its engines burning fierce violet against the starlit void. Inside the cockpit, Cassian's hands danced across the controls while Lyra gripped the quantum core to her chest, her shadow wings still rippling with residual power from their escape. 7 pursuit ships, Cassian announced, his voice taut. Hegemony Ravenclaw-class hunters. They're not here to take prisoners. Lyra leaned forward, studying the neural navigation interface pulsing with data streams. The Crimson Nebula is 12 minutes ahead at maximum thrust. We could lose them in the storm. The Crimson Nebula. Cassian shot her a look of disbelief. That's suicide. The magnetic storms drive pilots insane. No one successfully navigated it in 53 years, Lyra finished. Because the last wingweaver to try died in the attempt. She met his gaze. But I'm not dead yet. The ship shuddered as the first volley of plasma torpedoes streaked past. Cassian cursed, rolling the wraith into a spiral that seemed to defy physics. Your confidence is charming, but I'd rather not test if those wings can work in vacuum. Trust me. Lyra placed her hand over his on the controls. I can sense the currents in the nebula. The shadow paths between storms. It's like reading Braille written in starlight. Another blast rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed across the console as their shields weakened. The pursuing vessels were gaining, their weapons charging for killing shots. Cassian's jaw clenched. If we die, I'm haunting you in the afterlife. Deal. Lyra's wings expanded, filling the cockpit with dancing shadows that seemed to pulse in time with the quantum core's energy. Full power to the engines. I'll guide us through. The stellar wraith surged forward, its experimental quantum drive howling as Cassian pushed it beyond safety limits. The Crimson Nebula loomed before them, a vast curtain of scarlet gas shot through with lightning that seemed to form impossible patterns. The pursuing ships hesitated at the nebula's edge. All except one. Commander Relix, Cassian growled, recognizing the signature of the lead vessel. Should have known she'd be willing to follow us into hell. They plunged into the nebula's embrace. Immediately, the ship's sensors went haywire. Lightning storms bigger than planets writhed around them, while magnetic eddies threatened to tear the hull apart. The neural interface screamed with corrupted data. But Lyra saw something else. Through her wingweaver senses, the chaos resolved into a tapestry of forces, dark matter currents and quantum riptides that formed a secret geography of the impossible. Bank left, she commanded. 43 degrees. There's a shadow path between the storm fronts. Cassian obeyed, though sweat beaded on his forehead as proximity alarms shrieked. They threaded through a gap in the lightning that seemed barely wider than the ship itself. Behind them, Relix's vessel followed with inhuman precision. She's got some kind of advanced plotting computer, Cassian said. Whatever path we take, she'll match it. Then we'll take a path no computer can calculate. Lyra's eyes began to glow with the same fierce light as the quantum core. Her wings spread wider, encompassing both of them in living shadow. When I say now, cut all power. Everything except life support. You're insane. Probably. She smiled, and there was something wild and beautiful in it. But I'm also free. They dove deeper into the nebula's heart, where lightning storms collided in displays that would drive most pilots mad. Lyra called out course corrections with increasing urgency as Relix's ship gained ground. Then, just as the pursuing vessel's weapons locked on, Lyra shouted, "Now!" Cassian killed the power. For a moment, they hung suspended in the crimson chaos. Then Lyra's wings pulsed with energy that seemed to draw strength from both the quantum core and the nebula itself. Shadow enveloped the ship completely. Through the viewport, Cassian watched in awe as reality folded. There was a sensation like falling through dreams, and suddenly they were elsewhere in the nebula, emerging from a curtain of darkness into relative calm. Behind them, Relix's ship screamed past their previous location, weapons firing at empty space. Without a wingweaver's senses to guide her, she plunged straight into a magnetic storm that tore her vessel apart in seconds. Cassian restored power, his hands shaking slightly. That was. I've never seen anything like that. Lyra sagged in her seat, exhausted but triumphant. Wingweaver shadow walking. The old stories say we used it to step between stars before there were ships. She looked down at the quantum core, still pulsing with mysterious energy. Though I've never managed to take something as large as a ship before. I think this helped somehow. About that. Cassian's voice grew serious. The core's not just advanced tech, is it? There's a reason the hegemony kept it so close to where they were holding you. No. Lyra cradled the device, watching patterns swirl beneath its surface that matched the markings on her skin. I think it's part of something much older. Something they tried to make us forget. Her wings stirred restlessly. And I think I know where we need to go next. Where? There's a place, a sanctuary station hidden in the void between spiral arms. The Resistance calls it Haven's Light. If anyone knows the truth about this core, and about what the hegemony did to my people, we'll find them there. Cassian nodded slowly, plotting a course through the nebula's calmer regions. Haven's Light it is. He glanced at her. Though next time you want to bend reality, a little more warning would be nice. Lyra laughed, and the sound seemed to make the shadows dance. Now where's the fun in that? Haven's Light appeared like a mirage among the stars, a massive space station crafted from salvaged ships and ancient technology, its hull adorned with gardens growing in transparent domes. As the stellar wraith approached, Lyra pressed her hand against the viewport, her shadow wings quivering at the sight of other wingweavers flying freely between the station's spires. I never thought. She whispered. They told us we were the last. Cassian's expression softened as he watched her. The hegemony's good at making people believe they're alone. He guided the ship toward a hidden docking port that had appeared after a series of encrypted transmissions. Though I admit, I didn't expect quite this many refugees. They docked among vessels from 100 worlds, everything from sleek racing ships to battle-scarred freighters. As they disembarked, they were met by a delegation led by an elderly wingweaver whose shadow wings had turned silver with age. Welcome to Haven's Light, she said, her eyes fixed on Lyra. I am Keeper Celine. We've been watching for you since you escaped Frost Gate. Her gaze shifted to the quantum core Lyra carried. And I see you brought it home at last. Cassian's hand drifted toward his weapon. You knew about the core. Peace, Starfarer. Celine raised her hands. We have much to explain. Come. They followed her through corridors where plants grew from hydroponic walls and children of various species played among floating light sculptures. Other wing-weavers nodded respectfully as they passed, their wings creating patterns of shadow and light that seemed almost like a language. Celine led them to a vast chamber dominated by a holographic map of the galaxy. But unlike normal star charts, this one showed currents of darkness flowing between the stars, shadow paths that pulsed with familiar energy. What you carry, Celine said, gesturing to the quantum core, is not merely a power source. It is a key, crafted by our ancestors to unlock the network, an ancient web of shadow paths that once connected all corners of the galaxy. Lyra placed the core in a receptacle at the map center. Immediately, the holographic display shifted, revealing more paths, more connections. The shadow walking I did in the nebula was only a fraction of what we once could do. Celine's wings stirred with remembered grief. Before the hegemony feared our power and hunted us nearly to extinction. They destroyed the network's anchor points, scattered our people, tried to make us forget who we were. But why? Cassian asked. Why fear a transportation system? Because it gave us freedom, another voice said. A younger wingweaver named Orion stepped forward, his wings midnight blue. The network let anyone travel anywhere, instantly. No customs, no tolls, no control. The hegemony built their empire on controlling the space lanes. They couldn't allow an alternative. Lyra's wings flared with sudden anger. So they slaughtered us. Imprisoned those they couldn't kill. Made us believe we were monsters. Yes. Celine touched her shoulder gently. But they didn't find all the anchor points. Some of us preserved the old knowledge, waiting for the right moment. Waiting for you. Me. Why me? Because you bear the royal markings. Celine traced the spiraling patterns on Lyra's arms. You're not just any wing weaver, you're the last of the pattern singers, those who could write new paths into the very fabric of space. Cassian stepped closer to Lyra, protective but not restraining. And I'm guessing the hegemony knows this too. It's why they kept her close to the core. Indeed. Orion's expression darkened. They've been searching for someone with her gifts, hoping to corrupt the network for their own use. That's why we had to act when we learned where they were holding both her and the core. Lyra turned to Cassian. The explosions at Frost Gate. The security failures. That wasn't just you, was it? He shook his head. I had help. Though I didn't know from whom at the time. He met Celine's gaze. Your resistance has better infiltration than I thought. We've had centuries to prepare, Celine said. But now time grows short. The hegemony will have discovered other cores by now. They'll be looking for more pattern singers. Then teach me, Lyra said firmly. Show me how to use these powers properly. If the network is our heritage, let's rebuild it, but this time as a weapon against them. Celine and Orion exchanged glances. The training is dangerous, Orion warned. Opening old paths can draw things from the void between spaces. And creating new ones requires touching powers that drove some pattern singers mad. I don't care. Lyra's wings spread, dancing with starlight. They tried to break me, to make me believe I was nothing but a weapon. Instead, I'll become something they never expected, a key to everyone's freedom. Cassian touched her arm. You don't have to do this alone. She turned to him, surprised by the emotion in his voice. The shadow paths are no place for non-wingweavers. I won't risk. I'm not leaving. His smile held challenge and something deeper. Someone needs to fly the ship while you're walking between stars. Besides, I've gotten used to having a co-pilot who can bend reality. Celine watched them with knowing eyes. Love, too, was something the hegemony tried to steal from us. They thought it made us weak. Her silver wings shimmered. They never understood it was our greatest strength. Lyra felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Orion rushed to a console, his wings rigid with tension. Hegemony warships, he reported. A full battle fleet, approaching from multiple vectors. They must have followed our shadow wake from the nebula. How long? Celine demanded. Hours, at most. They'll have pattern trackers with them, corrupted wing weavers who sold their souls to the Empire. Lyra squeezed Cassian's hand, then stepped forward. Then we have no choice. Begin the training now. Show me everything you can. Her wings spread like a promise of revolution. By the time they reach us, I'll give them something worth fearing. Deep within Haven's Light's most ancient section, Lyra stood in a chamber of living shadows, her wings extended as she traced patterns in the void. Around her, crystalline pillars hummed with the same energy as the quantum core, while Celine's voice guided her through the forgotten arts of the pattern singers. Feel the threads between stars, Celine instructed. They're like silk in darkness, waiting to be woven. Cassian watched from the doorway, unable to see the shadow paths but mesmerized by the way Lyra's wings created cascading patterns of darkness and light. In the 6 hours since the hegemony fleet had been detected, she'd absorbed decades of knowledge with frightening speed. The paths are singing, Lyra whispered, her eyes glowing with stellar fire. Each one has its own melody. Yes. Celine's silver wings shimmered. That's why we were called pattern singers. We don't just walk the paths, we sing them into being. Lyra began to hum, a haunting melody that made the shadows dance. The quantum core pulsed in response, and suddenly the air split open, revealing a corridor of starlight that hadn't existed moments before. Extraordinary, Orion breathed, entering with tactical displays hovering around him. You've reopened one of the ancient highways. It leads straight to the Heart Nebula. But Lyra wasn't finished. Her song changed, became something wild and beautiful, and more paths appeared, dozens of them, intersecting and weaving together like a tapestry of darkness and stars. Stop. Celine warned. Too many at once could. The paths suddenly twisted, and something emerged from the spaces between them, a creature of void stuff and hungry light. It lunged for Lyra, but Cassian was faster. He tackled her aside as Orion's wings created a barrier of solid shadow. The creature dissipated, and the paths sealed themselves. Lyra lay in Cassian's arms, shaking but unhurt. I'm sorry, she gasped. I felt it all connecting, and I couldn't stop. You have nothing to apologize for, Celine said firmly. You've accomplished in hours what takes most pattern singers years to achieve. But power without control is exactly what the hegemony wants, Orion finished. They're hoping you'll open paths too quickly, draw in void beings they can use as weapons. Cassian helped Lyra to her feet, his hand lingering on her waist. Then we turn their strategy against them. Use the paths tactically, not all at once. Lyra nodded, then froze as new patterns suddenly blazed in her mind. The markings, she whispered, staring at the spirals on her arms. They're not just decoration. They're a map, coordinates to something the ancients hid. She pressed her hand to the nearest crystal pillar, and the chamber filled with holographic star charts. A series of points lit up, connecting in a pattern that matched her markings exactly. By the void, Celine breathed. Those are the locations of the original anchor points, places of power that could stabilize the entire network. And the hegemony fleet is about to pass right through one of them, Orion reported, checking his tactical displays. The Starfall Nexus. If they secure that point. They won't. Lyra's voice held steel and star song. Because we're going to reach it first. She turned to Cassian. Ready to navigate somewhere impossible? He grinned. With you? Always. We'll need a distraction for the main fleet, Orion said. I can lead our defense forces. No. Lyra's wings spread with new purpose. I have a better idea. Gather every wing weaver who can still shadow walk. I'm going to teach them to sing. Hours later, as the hegemony fleet approached Haven's Light, they faced something unprecedented, hundreds of shadow paths opening simultaneously, each sung into being by wing weavers working in harmony. As ships poured from the station's docks, they vanished into paths of darkness only to emerge at impossible angles, surrounding the hegemony vessels in three-dimensional ambush patterns. And in the chaos, a single ship, the Stellar Wraith, slipped away into the deepest shadow path of all, carrying a pattern singer, a starfarer, and a destiny written in starlight toward the Starfall Nexus, where the fate of the network itself would be decided. The Starfall Nexus hung in space like a tear in reality, a massive structure of crystal and darkness that predated the hegemony itself. As the Stellar Wraith emerged from its shadow path, Lyra gasped at the sight of ancient wingweaver script carved into its surface in letters a kilometer high. But they weren't alone. A hegemony dreadnought waited there, the Void's Herald, commanded by pattern tracker Meridian, whose corrupted wings dripped with liquid darkness. They knew we'd come here, Cassian growled, bringing the ship's weapons online. Of course we did, Meridian's voice crackled over their comms. We've waited centuries for a pattern singer strong enough to activate the Nexus. Though I must admit, teaching the refugees to sing was unexpected. Through the viewport, they could see void beings manifesting around the Herald, creatures of anti-light that Meridian had drawn through corrupted shadow paths. They writhed in patterns that hurt the eyes, hungry for anything that still held light. The Nexus doesn't belong to you, Lyra transmitted back. None of this does. You twisted our gifts, turned them into weapons. We improved them, Meridian interrupted. Your ancestors were too weak to see the true potential of the void. But you're different. Join us. Help us remake the network into something glorious and terrible. The quantum core pulsed in Lyra's hands, resonating with the Nexus. In that moment, she understood what it truly was, not just a key, but a seed. Planted in the right place, sing the right pattern, and the entire network could be reborn. Or corrupted forever. Cassian, she said softly. I need you to trust me. He met her gaze, and in his eyes she saw not just trust but something deeper, something that made her wings flutter and her heart soar. Always. Lyra closed her eyes and began to sing. It wasn't like her previous patterns. This was the song of first light, of stars being born, of shadows learning to dance. The quantum core rose from her hands, pulsing in harmony with her voice. Her wings spread impossibly wide, became a cathedral of living shadow. The void beings shrieked and recoiled as paths of pure starlight opened throughout the area. Not the corrupted shadows Meridian commanded, but something older and purer, the original paths, singing themselves back into existence. No. Meridian's voice held real fear now. You'll destroy everything we've built. Not destroy, Lyra sang. Transform. She poured everything into the pattern, her pain, her hope, her newfound love. The quantum core blazed and split apart, its fragments streaming toward the Nexus like falling stars. Where they struck, new paths opened, interconnecting, weaving themselves into a new network. Cassian breathed in awe. But different. He was right. Instead of paths of pure shadow, these were hybrid things, shadow and light intertwined, neither corrupted nor pure but something altogether new. They spread outward in a wave, touching every shadow path in existence, transforming them. On Haven's Light, wingweavers gasped as their powers shifted, evolved. The void beings around the Herald weren't destroyed but changed, becoming creatures of twilight that no longer hungered for light. Even Meridian's corrupted wings began to shimmer with hints of radiance. What have you done? Meridian demanded. Created balance, Lyra answered. Shadow needs light. Light needs shadow. We forgot that, turned it into a war between extremes. But the true power was always in the spaces between. The Nexus itself was transforming, its ancient script blazing with new meaning. The network was no longer a thing of just darkness or light, but a twilight web that any wing-weaver could access, one that couldn't be corrupted because it contained both shadow and radiance in perfect harmony. "It's beautiful," Cassian said, taking her hand. Meridian's ship hung silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it powered down its weapons. Perhaps we all forgot what beauty was. In the days that followed, the change rippled across the galaxy. The hegemony's power, built on controlling the darkness, began to crumble as the new network allowed free travel to any who could learn its songs. Haven's Light became a center of learning where wing-weavers taught others to access the twilight paths. And Lyra and Cassian? They flew the shadow roads in the stellar wraith, mapping the transformed network, discovering wonders that had been hidden in darkness for centuries. Their love became legend among wing-weavers, proof that the greatest patterns were those woven between hearts. Where to next? Cassian would ask each morning, as stars wheeled beyond their viewport. And Lyra would smile, her wings shimmering with shadow and light as she sang new paths into being. Because she had learned the greatest truth of all, that sometimes the most precious freedom was simply the power to choose one's own way forward, hand in hand with someone who saw both your darkness and your light, and loved you for both. Together, they wrote their story across the stars, proof that even in a universe of twilight, love could light the way home.